sworn at by anyone who passed her cell. Finally, on May 24th, 1431, Joan was marched to the cemetery of Saint-Ouen.
Il est encore temps de sauver votre âme, Jeanne. Allez-y, signez. Signez, Jeanne.
Joan had confessed. She had submitted herself to the power of the church. They had finally broken her after a year of imprisonment. But had she saved her soul or just saved her skin?
Jeanne a senti qu'ils étaient en train de la coincer.
Joan felt they were cornering her, catching her out. And so she didn't sign her name, even though she knew how to sign it. We have some of her letters, which she signed Jeanne, with an H, as it was written at the time. But here, she signs with a cross inside a circle. She had told her confessor, Brother Pasquarel, that when she signed with a cross in a circle, it meant that she didn't believe what she was signing. So you see what she was doing? And this is in the trial records.
Joan was barely 19 years old. Within 2 years, she had risen from peasant to savior of France. Now she was a broken woman alone on a jail floor. When Joan signed a false confession of idolatry and heresy, Cauchon got what he wanted, but the English still weren't satisfied.
Les soldats anglais ont découvert à la fin.
At the end of the trial, the English soldiers found out that Joan was condemned to life imprisonment, but wouldn't die. When they found this out, the English garrison rebelled.
La garnison anglaise s'est révoltée.
As dark as it seems, this is the great moment of the story. The moment that made Joan of Arc immortal. She lay naked on the cold floor of her cell, utterly alone, head shaved and humiliated. Yet from this pit of human darkness, she found the strength to be true to her voices, to her God, to herself. Joan decided to renounce her confession. She would rather die than betray everything she had lived for. That moment made her immortal.
Joliet! Joliet!
When Cauchon heard that Joan had gone back on her confession, he had her sent directly from her cell to the marketplace. As a relapsed heretic, Joan knew that there was no other fate but death. She was to be burnt alive on May 30th, 1431.
On va faire un bûcher très haut.
They built a very high pyre so that everyone could see her. And because it was so high, the executioner, who lit the fire, couldn't do as he would with other prisoners condemned to death. He couldn't strangle her before the flames reached her.
Avant que les flammes arrivent.
Joan had made her final transformation. It is said when Joan died, doves flew away from the palace to all the free parts of France.
The bourgeois de Paris, who was keeping a journal in Paris at the time of her burning, wrote down that after her death, they pulled the clothes off her poor carcass to show to the crowd that she was a woman. That implies very, very strongly that a lot of people thought she wasn't. Well, what did they think she was? They thought she might, maybe they thought she was a man, maybe they thought she was a monster, maybe they thought she was a demon. Who knows what they thought, but the point was there was a huge question around the fact of whether or not she was a woman.
There is another story that Joan's heart remained even though everything else was burnt to ashes. And in some senses, this is true. Her heart, or her spirit, lived on. Her image remained so potent that it would be used and abused for centuries. 22 years after Joan's death, Charles VII finally won the 100 Years' War for France. But he had a problem. How could he be the legitimate king if the woman who got him crowned was a heretic? Charles overturned the original trial that damned Joan. He revived her image as a divine messenger for his own ends. Even her family exploited her.
Her very brothers turned up with someone they said was Joan, and that she had been substituted at the stake. This is a little bit like sightings of Elvis. She'd been substituted at the stake, someone else had burned in her stead, and this young woman was actually the real Joan of Arc, still alive. And there were various banquets and celebrations about her return to life. And they, of course, made quite a lot of money out of this.
Joan of Arc has come to represent so many contrary ideas and causes.
On the one hand, she's an ordinary peasant woman, and so therefore seems to represent the lot of the ordinary person, or the Jacques, as the French would say.
En URSS,
In the USSR, she was seen as the peasant girl who was betrayed by her king and burned by the church. So it was perfect.
On the other hand, she's a peasant woman who supported royal authority and the establishment.
Though a devout Catholic, she became one of the first Protestant saints. She wasn't canonized by the Pope until 1920.
en Angleterre. Et ça, c'est assez extraordinaire.
It's extraordinary that churches and chapels dedicated to Joan of Arc could be found in England much earlier than in France.
Joan of Arc inspires us by remaining true to herself despite all the odds. During her life, she inspired thousands. Through her death, she inspired millions. She was a warrior woman who killed no one. And yet she was able to change the course of history through no other weapon than the power to believe.